It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
Independence of me, Ernest Hancock, from the Southern Desert in the southwest of America and Arizona. This is today is the day we're going to get learnified on all kinds of stuff. And as a requested guest by one of our listeners and readers said, "Man, I'm telling you, Ernie, you need to talk to Courtenay Turner. You know, she's host of the Courtenay Turner podcast, founder organizer of CognitiveLibertyConference.com and Rebels for CAUSE. We'll get that explained to us. And co-host of Dangerous Names, co-founder of Pirate Stream Media, Congenital Rubella Warrior. Well, we're going to find out what that means too. And a freedom fighter, my favorite kind. All right, this is what we're going to do. I want to go ahead and introduce her to the audience, and hopefully we'll find a new best friend and in the fight for. And we're going to go ahead and, because it had a big impact on someone I respect, that said, you need to talk the court. You're not conspiracy enough, Ernie. You're not doing it enough. You think that, I don't know, whatever he thinks I think, but this is for you. You help program this show. I get a lot of our content on Freedom's Phoenix from the audience. It's amazing. So I'm looking forward to making a new friend, Courtenay Turner. Thank you for coming on, Courtenay. Do me a favor and introduce yourself to the audience of all things that make you importante. Go ahead. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I'm Courtenay Turner. I'm the host of the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm also a co-host of the Dangerous Names, as you mentioned. And I do these conferences, and we can get into that, Rebels for a Cause. And I recently hosted the Omni War, which was a symposium that was online. And I also did the Cognitive Liberty Conference. And how did I get started in all of this? Well, in 2020, I was living out in Santa Monica, California. I found myself incredibly depressed and isolated. Everything was locked down. And I didn't realize how much I still depended on nonverbal communication until all the coping mechanisms I spent my life developing were completely stripped from me. So
now, where was it that you lived, that you were doing this? You said where?
I was in Santa Monica, California.
Okay. Now, for those that don't know where Santa Monica is, I got three areas: San Diego, L.A., San Francisco. Where are you at?
So it was like right outside. It's in L. It's technically part of the 30-mile zone in L.A.
Got it. Okay.
But it's on the beach. Yeah. So. Yeah.
That you weren't allowed to go to in COVID. I get it.
So during COVID, I found myself, really isolated. I got fired from both the jobs I was working at. I can't prove it, but I'm 99.9 repeating infinitely sure that it was over politics. And I am hearing impaired. So you mentioned the congenital rubella. I to this day not quite sure that is quite accurate, but that's the diagnosis. But essentially, my mom was sick during first trimester of pregnancy, and it rendered me with several complications. So I'm blind in one eye. I had heart surgery when I was about a year old. I was born with hypotonic limbs, fine graphic motor impairment, stunted growth, all sorts of complications, and I'm bilaterally hearing impaired. But I actually learned how to speak by reading lips. I didn't get hearing aids till I was almost 6 years old. But then I found myself in in the middle of the lockdowns where everybody had their face covered, and I couldn't communicate with people because I couldn't hear them. I could hear that there was sound, but I didn't have clarity of speech. So this is what I'm saying. All the coping mechanisms I spent my life developing, I didn't realize how much I still depended on them. So I take for granted that I can see people's faces. And but I found myself really struggling. And of course, it was a very difficult time for many people. But for me, it was really particularly difficult and challenging because I couldn't communicate with people. So I was just really isolated. And they would get frustrated with me, which was I found ironic. I was like, you can hear me. I refused to wear it. So they could hear me perfectly fine. But I was like, you can take it off. So the fact that you're upset with me doesn't really make any sense. You're expecting me to be able to understand you, and I can't. I have no control over that. So it was very, very frustrating. I ended up joining a lot of online groups just to try and communicate with people. And someone had heard about my birth story. And at the time, I was doing aerial acrobatic performances and motivational speaking, using movement as a metaphor for life, talking about how people can use their physical training as a tool to overcome adversity in other areas of life. So really more the philosophical aspects of movement and physical training. But I would share my personal story as a testament. And so, of course, those were all canceled. I had a couple of speaking opportunities that were on Zoom, but it's not quite the same. And showing a video of an aerial performance, not quite the same. So that ended pretty quickly. And I was on these Zoom calls, and somebody heard about my story, and they said, "You need to be on Rogan." And I said, "What's a Rogan? Why do I need to be on it?" And so I started listening to, Rogan and other podcasts, and a lot of people had suggested that I start a podcast. And at first the idea sounded like a horrendous idea, incredibly terrifying, and not something I was interested in at all. But then it dawned on me that naked face conversations, even if it was through a digital portal, might save my life. And so I decided to make a commitment to myself for 6 months. And if I could get people in person, IRL, all the better. But, sometimes that wasn't possible. So I did remote interviews. And I told my guests, hey, I might not air this. This is really just for me personally. I really just want to have meaningful discourse with naked faces. And so the guests really loved it. It did wonders for my own morale. And so I continued it, and then I aired my first episode. It was, I believe it was January of 2021. I did the first solo one earlier than that. It was in 2020. It was just my personal story. That was kind of like a test release. And then I started the interviews, airing the interviews in January of 2021. And I started mostly in a very political mindset, definitely in the health freedom space. Given my background, obviously that was very personal to me and something I was really passionate about. But I pretty quickly, felt like I started off saying that I don't understand the Republicans are behaving as controlled opposition for the left. And then a few weeks in, I said, oh, wait, they were designed to be controlled opposition for the left. And it sent me down all sorts of different paths and deep dives. So, yeah, here I am. And,
Okay, well, I got a couple of questions. One, how is it that your hearing impairment makes it to where you can hear me? Are you using electronics, aids? I mean, how does that work?
Yes. So when I was 6 years old, I got bilateral hearing aids. I wear hearing aids in both ears. Yeah.
Okay, so you can understand me.
Yes. But I learned how to speak by
Everybody
reading
can hear
lips.
me.
So that was how I learned how to speak. So when everybody's faces was covered, the hearing aids make it so that I could hear, but I didn't have clarity of speech. So I still depend on, with the technology, I can make this loud enough where I can hear and understand. But even through the digital interface, it helps when I see people's faces. So I won't
that's a freaking secret superhero power. It's interesting. Damn. Watch out! She can read lips. I mean, you got that going for you. Now,
I have a really, really quick, very funny story about that. When I was in high school, we had the TV on in the basement, and I had a couple of friends over, and we started walking down to the basement, and I'm walking down the stairs, and I start cracking up, like hilariously, hysterically laughing. Friends was on, the show Friends. And my friends just looked at me like I had 10 heads. And I turned to them and said, you didn't think that was funny? Rachel said that to Ross, and then Ross said that to Rachel. Like, I thought it was hilarious. Nobody else thinks it's funny. And the two of them just looked at each other and then looked at me like, what? Why do you not think that was funny? And they said, Courtenay, the TV's on mute. We can't hear it. And I had no idea. Like, I actually didn't process that, oh my gosh, it's on mute. They can't hear it. Yeah.
Secret power. You gotta have a letter on your chest. This is an introduction, and I wanted you to go ahead and feel free to express yourself in the motivation for you doing this kind of work. This is, I look at a lot of your stuff, a lot of people I've interviewed, people that, I respect in the space of, and I want to understand, what space are you in? What is it that the niche that you're in of sharing with people your opinions and news and so on? What is it? How did you get there? And then we'll get into motivation of why. So tell me, what space do you think it is that your show occupies?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, when people ask me what the central theme, I cover such a wide range of topics, it's really difficult for me to answer that question. But I would say that it's really about the preservation of the free will of humanity. And I know that sounds really broad. It also probably sounds incredibly, hubristic to think that I'm going to have any role in that. But really, I aim to inform.
We all should have a role in that.
Exactly. So I aim to inform, inspire, and empower people to exercise their free will. And, I do dives in all different areas. A lot of it is centered around the roots of the New World Order. So, that leads me down some very interesting paths, obviously, because it's all converging at this time. And I've noticed that with most people, they may start in one place, but then, it ends up all intersecting because it's about the New World Order. That's what's being fomented currently. So so as I said, I started out really in the health and, medical freedom space, although I currently am of the mindset that was actually really created as an op. That not to say that I don't advocate for medical freedom. I absolutely do. But I think the movement itself was very co-opted or possibly even created as a controlled opposition type of...
They wouldn't do that. That'd be wrong.
What?
I go, they, them, those wouldn't co-opt healthcare or anything. That'd be wrong. That would be wrong. They wouldn't do it. It's like a lot of times they go, conspiracy, not earnest. Do you think that they would, chemtrail or fluoridate or digital this or take, I don't know, can they? Well, then they are.
They absolutely are.
They wouldn't do election fraud. That'd be wrong. I mean, come on. So you're in that space, covered the secrets, exposing the lies kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And,
Why?
I'm not, I'm certainly, the term conspiracy theorist was weaponized by the CIA, document 1035-960, countering the Warren Commission. I'm sure your audience is quite familiar. So I'm not one of those people who shies away, but I don't see a lot of the work that I do, although I've certainly been labeled a conspiracy theorist. I was actually recently on a show with a roundtable of all of us, quote unquote, conspiracy theorists. But I don't really see the work that I do being...
Which are batting 1,000, by the way.
Pardon?
Which are batting 1,000, by the way.
Totally. But I don't really see my work as being conspiracy theory. Sometimes I will put forth a theory, and I will be very transparent about that. I'll say I don't have the smoking gun evidence, but there are a lot of data points I can present, and this is what I see, based on these data points. That's a conspiracy theory. And I will certainly do that from time to time. But most of what I do, I feel like, is really just doing the deep investigative work and analysis. It's not like I'm not presenting material that's not there. It's hidden in plain sight, as they like to say, So it's really just about exposing, calling out the lies, and also, bringing clarity to some things that have been mystified for people. So that's really what I see as, my efforts. So.
Okay, here we go. You ready? Here we go. Why? What motivated you?
Well, I certainly feel like I was very much a byproduct of, all of these tyrannical measures when I was in California. What really spearheaded a lot for me during 2020, as I was involved in all these various groups and trying to figure out what was going on and how we could turn things around. My quote unquote wake up moment, if you will. I don't love that term, but it seems to be the one most people use and it's applicable. So I found that a lot of people would have these crises that had to be solved at midnight, which meant I was never going to sleep for some reason. Right. And I had a friend who reached out to me. He sent me a video and he said, have you ever seen this? Have you ever heard of him? And it was a video of Dr. John Coleman doing the Committee of 300 speech, which is actually still available on YouTube, surprisingly enough. Not the original, but, people have pirated it, and it's up on YouTube to this day. So I watched it, and he said, okay, watch it, then call me back. And we were on the phone at 5 a.m. that morning. But I watched it, and then I started looking up, who he was and what he had written and his whole story, and because I wasn't familiar, and I found that he had written 13 books that I could find, and one of them was retailing for almost $5,000 on Amazon. I don't have $5,000 to spend on a book, so I found the PDF. He is no longer with us, so I'm not taking money from him. But I read it 3 times in a week because I was just so riveted, and it really, what was so shocking to me was it met so much of my own personal cognitive dissonance, because so many of the fields that I had spent my life steeped in, when I was in high school, I wrote 285-page theses on dream analysis. I was very steeped in the world of psychology, and I had read Freud when I was 9 because my mom went back to school to become a psychologist. So I was very familiar with that world. I was very familiar with philosophy. I majored in philosophy in high school. I actually in college, and I did an independent study in high school though on philosophy. But in college, I started out as a neuroscience major, and I ended up with a degree in philosophy. And then I went into the entertainment industry, and I had found through this book that Tavistock was very involved and instrumental in social engineering of the masses through those fields. And that was a major paradigm shift for me, because it was everything I thought was so just wasn't so, So that really required me to start examining the things that I held to be fact and things that beliefs that I held dear, and to really take a closer look at them and re-examine what I knew to be true and if it was or not. So,
okay, you mentioned the Committee of 300 speech, mm-hmm. and I looked it up and I want to add it to today's archive since you mentioned it. Is it John Coleman? Is that one there?
Dr. John Coleman. Now, I will caveat, I do, now years later, the research I've done, I do think he was a bit of a limited hangout, but I do think a lot of his material is very, very valuable. He was a former MI6, and, so he was intelligence, and he never listed sources. So you can't verify. You can't, double check his work, essentially. And I really love to do that. If you read my material, you will see I have extensive references or hyperlinks or resource lists. I'm all about people being able to do their own research if they wish to do so. Never take my word as face value. All of us are fallible. We all have biases. None of us are impervious. So I want people to be able to do the research for themselves. I'm just, presenting the synthesis and the analysis that I've done. And then, feel free to agree or disagree, but I want you to be able to go and, make your own decisions. So I really find that a little problematic reading his material. There's never any resources. I have found a lot of what he put forth to be, to come true, to check out. But I do want to just caveat that, anytime somebody doesn't have sources, that's always a little questionable.
Well, the fact that you came across this information, you found it important, I'm sending it to Donna to put up in the archive, that you think this is important, and I have to, ask again, why? What was it, your grandmother, uncle, book you read, movie you saw, something that you gave a crap? I need that, man, that's a secret sauce thing. I need to know how we can make a bunch of Courtenays. I want to know what is the motivation for you to care.
I care because I feel I've been lied to my whole life. So I don't want other people to be lied to, and I think that us being put under these spells, which I really do feel like they are spells, the word spell casting, the way the narrative steering, all the social engineering, it limits us from truly being free, and being able to exercise our free will. So for me, that's incredibly important. If you think about just 2020 and how devastating that was for so many people, so much of that was because of the psychological warfare. If people had not succumbed to covering their faces, I don't think that they would have been able to then move on to giving people experimental drugs, where I don't think they would have gone for it. But the first step was a basic compliance test. And the fact that they have this is
IQ test.
Maybe. I mean, it was definitely a compliance test, and I don't know that's always correlative to IQ. In fact, sometimes Elul wrote about this extensively, where sometimes higher IQ people are actually much more susceptible to propaganda. Right. And we see that, like all these quote unquote academics, right? They're so myopically steeped in their research that they can't possibly see outside of that bubble. And so they end up falling for a lot of this epistemological and cognitive warfare that's being,
Well, it's also incentives, how, they're in positions of keeping their job, keeping their friends, keeping their peers, kind of, but that's why I keep asking the why, because there's something different about someone like you that, no, I'm not complying with you. So I need to understand, what sent you on this path to care. You see, I mean, I need that secret sauce. What happened in your life that you cared? You go, this sucks. I'm gonna be an activist. I'm gonna share. I'm gonna split it to everybody. Why?
Well, there were so many instances. I don't feel like I can give you just one, but I'll give you an example. So I had mentioned that I was fired from both the gyms that I was working at. And I remember one, my coworker, she had actually referred me to the other gym. So she reached out to me, and she was very upset that I didn't put a black square for Blackout Tuesday. And she was very upset with me and told me it was a very irresponsible use of my platform, and on and on. And
you're doing it wrong.
Yes, I'm doing it wrong. She told me that we can't just be a white feminist. And I responded and I said, whoever said I was a feminist? I don't think you understand me at all, actually. I've never claimed to be a feminist, and I certainly wouldn't say that that's an
First, you got to define what a woman is.
Yeah, no, I can define it, and I'm pretty clear on it. I don't have any misconceptions about it, and I don't think that men and women are the same, or that you can just think yourself into something different. No, I don't subscribe to any of that, but there started to be her, and I tried to be polite about it. I really wasn't looking for confrontation. I said, I think we do much more for causes, in person. I don't really see what benefit my putting some square up on, an Instagram post is going to do. This really just looks like virtue signaling to me, and I don't see the purpose of it. But there were several, things that happened subsequently, along with my being fired. It was really interesting, actually, because one of the gyms was owned by 2 Navy SEALs. So I didn't expect them to have the response that they did. But we were talking about the lockdowns and the way people responded to it. And, I had just made a kind of glib throwaway parroting Ben Franklin that, those who choose security over freedom deserve neither. I'm paraphrasing.
And they'll lose both, yeah.
Yeah, like they don't deserve either. And they snapped at me. You don't understand the younger generation, and you don't understand what they're going through, and how could you be so insensitive? And they were really upset with me. I was fired pretty shortly after that, which was kind of shocking to me. I mean, they were Navy SEALs. I didn't think this was like a political statement. I knew they weren't aligned with me politically, but to me, that didn't sound political. I was like, I would have thought that was kind of basic American, but apparently I was wrong. But there were a bunch of other things, and then online people started, including this person who had told me about the blackout square, saying how they were so disappointed in me because I was their token disabled female friend, and that I should be advocating for all the social justice warrior issues, and the fact that I wasn't was such a disappointment. And
what kind of American are you?
Right. And I was so viscerally distraught by the virtue signaling. And it took me a really long time to figure out why, because intellectually I understood why I was opposed to virtue signaling, but I didn't understand why I was emotionally so distraught by it. But then I realized I knew exactly what it was. I had always been, as the quote unquote, somebody who had disabilities, physical challenges, there were things I really struggled with, but I never asked for any kind of assistance. That's just not how I was raised. I was mainstreamed, and if things were difficult, you figured out a way. Everybody has their challenges. These were mine. I figured out how to navigate. Sometimes I made it through. Sometimes things were more difficult for me. But when I got to college, it was the first time I was in an environment where the classrooms were much bigger, and I was much further away from the professor. I couldn't see the board, even when I was sitting in the front, because it was still so far away. I really struggled. I write very, very slowly. This wasn't in the days of where, you just had your iPhone and could record the classes, It was, handwritten notes, and I wrote very slowly. And I couldn't hear him because or her, I couldn't hear them because every time they would go to write on the board, they turned away and I couldn't see their face. So I found myself really struggling. I was like, because I was, not proud of this. I wasn't the kind of person who was super studious per se, but I could sit in a class and I had a pretty good memory. So I would catch it, and I really depended on that. But I was barely catching anything because I couldn't hear and see what was going on. And there was a girl who she was in a wheelchair, and she had a note taker who sat with her. And I realized I was actually legally entitled to this. So I remember going to the dean, and I, said I was interested in inquiring about these services, which I knew that I was legally entitled to. And they snapped at me and they said, "You're doing fine. Why do you need this?" And I could, the response that came out of me was, it almost surprised me, but I was so jarred by it. I was like, "Oh, why is fine okay? What if I wanted to do great? What?" I was so upset. And I realized the reason I was so upset is because this girl didn't actually need a note taker. She had other challenges, and she's awesome. This is, not a dig at her. She was actually really awesome. But she didn't need a note taker. But the fact that they gave it to her was to show that it was a virtue signal. They were showing that they were taking care of somebody who was visibly disabled. Now, my challenge.
And you're too pretty to get a note taker. You're too white.
But I think it was because it wasn't visible to them. They were like, "We don't get any brownie points by assisting you," even though I was legally entitled to them. And so then in 2020, when everybody was using me as I'm their token, female, disabled, whatever, the list goes on. And that gave them the check mark that they could pat themselves on the back. "Oh, I have a quote unquote disabled friend." It's really, that's how you view me? I'm a checkbox? But so the virtue signaling never served me. And I realized how inverted it was. It's never about helping the group that you're purporting to endorse. It's not about helping them. It's all narcissistic, self-involved, and it's all external. And usually it actually hinders the people who actually need help, right? In every case, whichever group we're looking at. But because it was so personal, I realized how upset I was by this. And these are just these lies that are being promulgated through these narratives and through the brainwashing of people. I mean, when you hear people who are steeped in critical theory, they sound so sure of themselves, so academic. They're citing all these, very esteemed texts. And it's all nonsense. It's basically just grievances. It's people who are, blaming other people for their problems. Newsflash, none of us were dealt a perfect hand. You're dealt a hand, you make the most of it. Are some hands better than others? Yeah. Anybody who's played poker knows that, right? Sometimes you get a better hand and you make the most of it, hopefully. But otherwise, what are your options? You fold? You're going to fold in life? Or are you going to say, okay, this is what I was dealt with? I believe everybody has strengths, gifts, and talents, and we all have unique strengths, gifts, and talents, and it's incumbent upon each of us to use those, to hone them, so that we can be of contribution. And that's why we all have different things to contribute. But to sit back and be like, "Oh, the world owes me, and I'm going to make a big fuss about it," and then make everybody feel bad, and then other people go around patting themselves on the back because they've virtue signaled, but they've not actually done anything to help. So it really, it made me kind of reevaluate a lot of my own personal experiences, and it just sent me down all sorts of kind of paths researching. But yeah, there were many instances, that's one that was pretty personal. So,
well, then you get into the area of conspiratorial, whatever the hell, and I'm going, we'll send you down that direction. And then, of course, I have audience members that, ooh, Courtenay, gonna explain it to you. Explain what?
Well, it depends on what you want explained. I'll do my best.
No, what is it you think the audience needs to know that you know? This is, we're going to start putting up Courtenay Turner shows. We're going to have interviews. We're gonna, and I'm going, why? What am I going to learn? What's different about what you want to share with the audience?
Well, it depends on really what topics. I mean, right now I have been doing a lot of research on this technocratic agenda. Those who are familiar with my Phoenix Conspiracy article, I've done a lot of shows on this topic as well. I've kind of painted this dialectical picture of these movements that are operating through the left and right hand path. When I say left and right hand path, I'm talking through political spectrums using various archetypes, occult archetypes, not to be confused with left and right hand path magic. That's actually inverted. It's on the other end, typically, not always, but typically. But I did paint this picture in the Phoenix Conspiracy article. I kind of drew the picture of Peter Thiel being the great grand master architect. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't, puppet strings above him. I do have lots of speculation about those. I mean, he's only a billionaire after all. I'm sure the trillionaires are controlling the billionaires. I think that's how that works. I could be wrong. But I'd like to operate on the strings that we can see, because those are the ones we could cut, theoretically. You can't cut strings that you can't see. So I talked about him as kind of the overarching, but then you've got the left and the right. And on the right, a lot of people are becoming much more aware of this movement, a philosophical movement that is driving the technocracy, as I see it, especially in this country, because of the Trump administration and because it's been so influential. So it's starting to come to the forefront, although a lot of people are acting like it's a new thing. And, the Dark Enlightenment has been around for decades. I mean, Nick Land was writing about these ideas back in the early 90s. Curtis Yarvin started his Unqualified Reservations blog back in 2007. This is not at all new. However, it is incredibly influential in the Trump administration, so it's definitely coming to the forefront. And that operates through the archetype of, kind of the right-hand political path, which is more patriarchal, the stern disciplinarian father, autocratic, top-down type of measures. Yarvin's advocating for a CEO-style monarchy. And then we've got the left-hand path, which I see as like the divine mother, right? It's a Gaia religion, Mother Earth. Then I'm actually very concerned because right now we do see the Dark Enlightenment at the forefront. However, I think that it's so overtly dark, hence the name, that I think it will be rejected by a lot of people. It's already, getting that kind of traction. And so I think it's going to rush people it's going to usher them right into the warm, nurturing embrace of Divine Mother, which is basically soft totalitarian and opt-in tyranny. And that technocracy is very much being, I think, abetted by movements. Certainly the more well-known would be like the UN, the World Economic Forum, the Klaus Schwab, you all know a Harari type narrative. But there's also this movement called Game B. And it's a very enticing movement, and I find it very deceptive. A lot of the people in it, I think, are very skilled. I would call them sophist. They're very skilled rhetoricians. When you take their words as face value, it appears to be very legitimate. It appears very intellectual, academically rigorous. But when you look beneath the surface, a lot of it is not what it seems, and they're using their own jargon, essentially to mystify people. But ultimately, it is advancing the technocracy. So I see it as these, and there's a lot of, I mean, I painted 4 different movements, but that's kind of the dialectical path. It's you're choosing 2 different roads. So one might be, ocean lined with palm trees, and the other might have mountains and, that kind of greenery, but both of them end up at the same destination. So it's just which path. They tend to typically sell you, it's marketing, right? So they're targeting various audiences, and ultimately the telos is shared. And so, the analogy I use is like you go into an ice cream shop and they have all these different flavors, but it's simulacra. None of them are made with the real good stuff, like real organic, milk and cream, sugar. It's all chemicals and poison, but they have all these different flavors to entice people, right? Whatever is more palatable to you. Do you want the chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, orange dream, whichever you want?
But you're eating ice cream. Damn it.
But it's poisonous. That's my point. So it's they sell it in a nice little wrapper so that it appeals to whichever audience it might be more palatable to.
Right.
But ultimately, they're feeding you poison. It's just different flavors of poison. And to me, the technocracy is incredibly pernicious. This is a movement that could, not to say that fascism and communism weren't responsible for hundreds of millions of atrocities through the centuries, but technocracy is unlike any kind of tyranny that I think most people can fathom, and could literally lead to the extinction of humanity. So that's.
But it's so. It makes you believe that you have to pick a flavor. You're going to eat ice cream. Damn it. And I look at it and I go, like it's technocracy, or it's central planning of they, them, those that won't leave us alone. Who are they, you conspiracists? The ones that won't leave me alone. That's who they are. So when you do that and you go, they're not leaving us alone. You can kind of survive. Well, pick a flavor. Well, you got all these different flavors. Well, pick one. Well, I want to, it's kind of the Rush album. If I choose not to choose, you still made a choice. I choose not. How about, nope. You got to pick a flavor. Somebody, I give you this. When I realized that when people give up their American passport or their citizenship or whatever, you can only do it if you join another plantation. It's like, well, where are you going to be? Where we're going to have you tracked? What country are you going to, pledge allegiance to? Which you can't give up this one unless you're at least still eating ice cream, And I'm going, wow, that whole concept right there is that you are a citizen of the world, and you'll be owe nothing, and here's your happy shot. So I'm going, this is so. There's so many choices to make to what to complain about, and the common theme that you're articulating to your audience and your fans and people that support your program, they can expect your position to be what? Freedom's the answer. What's the question? Pick none. Pick this one. Where are you coming from? Where are you leading your audience?
Well, I would like people to do restoration. I know a lot of people are of the mindset that the, America 1.0 is done. The Constitution's been too trampled on, and I don't agree with that. To me, I agree. Yes, the Constitution's been trampled on, but it's not the job of the piece of paper to uphold itself. It was an experiment in self-governance. That means that it's incumbent upon us. It is our job to self-govern. My concern is that most people are not equipped to self-govern these days, and that's by design. This is through the education system. I've done a lot of coverage on the, deracination from our roots of, who we are and what it means to be human and what it means to be American. And the byproduct of Western civilization, which, I don't typically call it Western civilization. That's actually a dialectical term. But that was intentional. The dumbing down of America and of many other countries was very intentional. And what it was to hollow out metaphysics. People talk about how, religion's been taken out of the schools, which is true. But it's not religion itself that was so problematic. It was that metaphysics was taken out. Because I would actually argue the school system is quite religious. I would say it's more of a Gnostic inverted religion, but it is very religious. They actually declared secular humanism to be a religion. The Supreme Court declared that. So, it's not that it's not religious. It's that it's not biblically oriented. And if you look at the founding of the United States, it was founded on Judeo-Christian metaphysics. So the First Amendment, people always think of it as freedom of speech, right? But the first part of it is actually freedom of religion, because they were fleeing a theocracy. They did not want a repeat of the Church of England. So they believed that we had freedom of conscience. Freedom of speech is downstream from freedom of conscience, which comes from freedom of religion, but it's under that framework of a Judeo-Christian metaphysics, which endows us with free will. That's where we get the freedom of conscience, right? It's from the free will. And freedom of will is not quite the same thing as freedom. It's a very important distinction, and I can get back to that. But then the other part of it is that, the right to peaceably assemble and redress our grievances. I don't know when we've done that, but that's part of self-governance. But it was so important to the founders that the populace be educated, that it be an educated citizenry that would be engaged in self-governance. And the reason for that was because they needed them to understand where our free will originates, what it means to have inalienable rights, right? You go back to the Declaration of Independence, the part that's so, that preamble that everybody knows, even if you've never read the Declaration of Independence, which I hate to say that, but most people haven't. But, we are all created equal, right? This means that we are all created equal under the eyes of God. This doesn't mean that you have to believe in God, but it means that this is the foundation, and that this is the foundation upon which the laws were constructed. So you have freedom to believe whatever you want in the privacy of your own home and, in your daily life, but you have to abide by the laws that were drafted based on this metaphysics. And so we were all created equal under the eyes of God, and then we are creating laws where we are all equal under the law. And then we have inalienable rights. We were endowed with inalienable rights from our Creator. What are those rights? The rights to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. However, it's incumbent upon us to defend those rights. And we can defend those rights. We were given the free will because we are rational moral beings, right? We are with our free will. It's a vehicle to pursue virtue and morality. And we have the capacity to adjudicate morality. And then it's our choice. We always miss the mark. We're humans. We're fallible. But we have that choice. And so I think this is just, it sounds like such basic stuff, but this was not taught. And it's for a reason. And what is taught is much more like, if it's taught at all, people are taught things like Lockean contractarian type of law, which is not natural law. It sounds like natural law. Rhetorically speaking, they use the terms, but ultimately, it's about human will versus human inalienable rights. Once you are bound by the contract versus by the natural law, you have now literally eradicated the meaning of what it truly means to be human. And this is I know this sounds like it's a deep philosophical conversation, but I think it's so incredibly important, especially for where we're at today. And I would like to see people get back to this, because if people got back to this, there would have been no problems back in 2020, just to go back to that example, because, that's where we started from, with people saying, no, I am not going to put something on my face that forces me to inhale my bodily waste. I'm just not going to do that, because that is a violation of my human being. That is a violation of, some people view their body as a temple, right? Why? You wouldn't expect in other regards for people to take their bodily waste and then put it back inside them. I'm not going to be super crude and, elaborate on that, but you would go, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. Why would you do that? But that's what they asked us to do. That is literally what they asked us to do. We have evidence that is what it is. You expel bodily waste through your breath. And so, but people wouldn't have done that if they knew who they were, if they knew what their inalienable rights were. I mean, we would have just had mass people. Some people would have.
Yeah, but don't you care about grandma? I mean, you're killing grandma.
Yeah, well, I would have known that that's not true. And I would have known that, if I really fell for that trope, I have the freedom to maybe not engage. I mean, it's the fact that people do not, they don't have a sense of what is real. And so they buy into fictional narratives because they don't know what is real. And the reason they don't know what's real is because they've been deracinated. They've been completely deracinated from any metaphysical or ontological truth.
Oh, new word, deracinated. Define that for me. I'm going to get smarter every day here. You know what that means?
It just means to be like cut off from the roots. So like you're separated, we're alienated from our roots. And we are. I mean, most
what is
people
the
don't...
root? What is that? What makes us human? What is, that we're trying to retain as a human being? What is it we're losing?
I think we're losing our free will. I mean, that's the first principle, but that's downstream from the metaphysical and ontological, right? So the metaphysical is like what is the nature of reality? That's what metaphysics means. And I believe we are not the architects of reality. We don't make up the contract. So you talked about okay, so people who leave this country, then where do they go? Well, right now I'm seeing this whole narrative around like network states, for instance, which Balaji Srinivasan in his book literally says that the whole purpose of it is the dissolution of geographical nation states in favor of ideological cyber network states. So you are giving up these nation states to go into one of these essentially control grids, a digital control
plantation.
You're going to it's a digital serfdom, right? It's a techno-feudal arena. That's what you are signing up for. You think you don't need like a digital ID to enter a specific currency? It doesn't matter what they call it. And that's what they do. Again, it's all these different flavors, right? So they'll call them like the Civium Project if it's Game B. Trump calls them Freedom Cities. The UN likes their C40 cities, which are all about Gaia religion. You're supporting the planet. They have all these different names for it. But ultimately, they're the same. It's a control grid that you are opting into. Unfortunately, with some of these movements, they make it very enticing. They make it sound like you're entering into an agreement, so it's your choice. You can enter any one of them you like. But good luck negotiating with a smart contract that's recursive. Like, good luck with that. I don't know how that's going to work out for you. It's difficult enough to negotiate with a human, right? And the legal system as it is. But when you're talking about a smart contract, that gets incredibly difficult. So we're seeing this movement, and a lot of people are championing it because they're hearing these nice words and they're living in utopian fantasies. And I think that if we can get back to some reality and recognize we are not the architects of reality, we are not God, we don't become gods, and that reality exists outside of us and we conform to reality. That doesn't mean that we don't have choices. We have free will. But that doesn't alter reality. I think these are very important things to get back to.
Yeah, no, I understand. How do you manifest, your opinion, your agency? Are you a really, really, really hard voter? You vote? Is that going to do it? Are we going to vote ourselves free? What do you think?
I don't think you should give up on voting. But I think what the problem with voting is that most people take zero action until every 4 years. They're like, oh, there's a presidential election. Now we're going to get motivated, which is the exact opposite of how this should operate. I think people need to get involved very, very locally. They have a lot more agency and power in your local community. Get involved. We saw, again, to go back to 2020, we saw the power of the mama bears who got involved in their school boards. A lot of them made a huge difference. That is impact. Get involved in your local farming communities and start making bills or like rejecting bills, making, movements against certain bills that are being passed. Like, just to be specific, I'll give you examples. Like, there are all these climate smart commodity projects that are being foisted upon these farmers. And if farmers got together in their local districts and said, hey, in this area, we're going to draft a bill where we say no, talk to the hand. There are no climate smart commodity projects allowed in this area. And get together with other like-minded people in your area who are going to stand up for that or create a bill that precludes any of that kind of encroachment. So do I think that there's power in the political system? Absolutely. The problem is that people go right to the, biggest belly of the beast where it's the most corrupt. And then they, start crying, oh, the political system doesn't work. Well, you didn't really do anything. You kind of outsourced all your political agency. And then you cried, oh my goodness, I have no power. And to me, that's not how this works. The people need to start really taking power where they have it, get involved. And it requires work. It requires work. It requires energy, effort, time. And I understand not everybody has that. And I think that's partly by design. But those that do, I feel like are misdirecting it. They're putting it in the wrong places.
You know, the one thing that, you know, what started me, you know, I've been doing this a long time. You know, I came at it from economics, my father's company, that's a long story, late 80s. And I was like, how do they get away with all this? I mean, I came across, they, them, those. I mean, it was New World Order before I ever even heard the word. And I'm going, how do they get away with this? It was election law. You may choose from communist candidate A or fascist candidate B. I mean, we don't care. We control everybody anyway. And I'm going, well, they need to fix this. Well, that sent me down the path, you know, a bunch of lawsuits and challenging and arguing before the Ninth Circuit. And I had some fun. But my thing was make them say it. I go, this is not what was promised in the deal. That's why the show is Declare Your Independence. Because it was, the purpose of government was defense of individual rights. When it doesn't do that, it's time to alter, to abolish. It's your right, your duty. And I'm going, okay, I'll sign up to that. Well, is it always just voting? No, like you say, it's, you know, it's activism. It's, you know, constant time and pressure. But the voting part that they were selling this whole thing on, they bastardized that a long time ago. And I'm in Arizona, Maricopa County, man. I was a long time ago. I'm like, man, this is screwed up. And I got the receipts. Well, it didn't matter. They, them, those were, yeah, what are you going to do about it, kid? I literally was told that. You know, I'm in Washington, it's a long story, but I go, look, I see what you're doing. They go, yeah? And what are you going to do about it? Whoa. Okay. Well, at least I got confirmation. I don't know. What can one person do? Let's find out, okay? Well, the election process, you want to vote, don't vote. I run for office a lot, you know, just to get up there and make them say it. But the act of voting, delegating authority to somebody else. You know, well, he's your president. I don't know, maybe you're president. You know, but when you delegate authority to someone else to raise your children, supply your food, regulate, inspect of whatever. Whoa! That just gets regulatory capture, and there's the very act that you are manifesting your opinion on how you want to be ruled. But you're going to be ruled, you know. So I really.
So that's a huge. I disagree with that. That's a huge misconception. You are not delegating authority. That is what we've done. That is our fault. We've allowed We've allowed everything to be outsourced. That is not how this system was set up. It was set up where they would represent, but they had to be held accountable. You were hiring them to do a job. That's not giving them authority. When you hire someone a lot of people hire people to watch their kids.
They always take it.
I'm not saying they don't, but that's our fault. I think we need to start taking some responsibility.
Yep.
We have allowed them to take it. What happened to the accountability? People just give up. People say, oh, well, you know, the system's corrupt, so we should just, let it go. And then they come up with these alternatives that are rooted in nothing. There's no foundation for them. We need to get back to some semblance of, if you're going to have somebody represent you, that means they work for you. You hold them accountable. That means that there's a responsibility that we have. This goes back to why I said the founding fathers wanted the citizenry to be educated, to understand what it meant to be self-governing. That doesn't mean that you outsource your responsibility. It doesn't mean that you delegate somebody to have authority over you. That's a complete fallacy.
You know, let's talk about that. You know, one thing that as time goes on, and, I'm a libertarian activist, freedom's the answer, what's the question, I own myself, I understand. As you go back and you look at the founding documents, the Federalists, Anti-Federalists, the Anti-Federalists and Libertarians go, let me tell you what's really going to happen, that kind of thing. The reason they do the Constitution, they had the Bill of Rights, was to be able to pass this new Constitution thing, because everybody go, whoa, way too much power. You got to have the 10 thou shalt nots of government kind of thing. So when you do more study, okay, then what would you replace it with? Nothing. Well, then you have even my libertarian friends. Well, you can't have nice things. There's always that guy. There's always that person. There's always that cartel, that group, that something that has no empathy. They're sociopaths, psychopaths. They don't care. They're going to do whatever they're going to do because they can do it, because we let them do it. So you're right. We have a lot of responsibility if we're going to have some kind of a democratic constitutional republic where you have the people, the democracy part registering their opinion to be represented by the republic part that's supposed to be chained down by the constitution part. Well, that's been under attack since the beginning, before the ink was dry on the Constitution. So I'm going, but when you look back at what they tried to craft, now it's, Hamilton gets in and does this thing so we can have a collective tax and have a war and whatever. I mean, you can go all on the details of how it went bad, but the rhetoric that like Thomas Jefferson and Madison, even Adams, these guys were, the goal was honorable. It was noble. At least that's how they sold it.
Nobody talks about people like Thomas Reed or Justice James Wilson. Justice James Wilson was actually one of the only 6 people who signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. He was one of our first Supreme Court justices. But for them, natural law was incredibly important. And so, again, it's not Lockean contractarian law. It's not about social contract. It was that the contract had to be fit into natural law, not the other way around. It's not about we're our own gods and we architect reality. That's not accurate. And it was
for
so
a moral people, informed moral people. Well, what happens when they're not moral anymore? So that's where the attack is.
But why are they not moral? Why are they not moral anymore?
Because of freaking constant pressure of they, them, those, making sure. That's why. It serves their purpose.
No, I think it's because they haven't been taught. I think, I think a lot of this goes back to the education system. And you can trace the education system and see that's actually accurate. Yeah, I mean, it's accurate. The Common Core curriculum is based on the World Core curriculum that was created by Robert Mueller, right, who predicated the whole thing on Alice Bailey's education in the New Age. Alice Bailey wrote out the 10-step plan for the New World Order. I mean, they laid this out very explicitly. So it's a complete
Give me a year. Give me a time frame for that.
For when the 2000 Ideas was?
I mean, was turn of the century? Was it, 1900? When you were saying they were laying out, this curriculum or what, I'm wondering this advocacy started.
I have to look up when the 2000 Ideas was, Robert Mueller's. But Alice Bailey was like 1920s. When she started writing, right? She created the Lucis Trust. She had she channeled all her 24 books, was from her ascended master, Dwal Kul was his name, the Tibetan, sometimes she calls him. But she channeled it and she wrote these 24 books. But in, which one was it where she outlined the 10-step plan for the new?
So around the 20s, before.
It was in.
That's why. How long it's been? It's 100 years ago.
It was in Externalization of the Hierarchy, Volume 4, I believe. Yeah,
no, I'm just kind of, kind of origination of this kind of stuff, because it started with, hell, in the late 1800s, they get to this Pledge of Allegiance thing.
Right, but if you look at the late 1800s, right, you had, this is that whole Leipzig Connection Consortium, right, with Wilhelm Wundt. And Wilhelm Wundt was known as like the grandfather of the field of psychology, and he was a Hegelian. He believed that humans had no soul. This is, again, we're going back to the metaphysical issue, right? He believed human had no soul. And then who are his disciples? Are people like Dewey, people like Skinner, Pavlov, right? We are just, it's all behavioral psychology, and we're all just manipulable constructs, right? You can just, like dogs and horses. And that was actually in founding documents, that we're not dogs and horses. We can't just be Pavlovian trained, right? It's not, that's all actually constructivism. And that is not reality. We have an immutable nature. There is an actual, substance to being human, and we are different. But yes, with that comes a great responsibility. So yes, part of that education system Yeah, and so part of that education system came downstream from Wilhelm Wundt. This was the late 1800s, the grandfather of the whole field of psychology, which I don't want to offend any psychologists out there. I have family members who are, and they mean well. They think they're doing good, and I know there are people who've been helped by the field. But when you really dig into it, I mean, the roots of it are, occultism. It's like spiritualism, mentalism. It's really all It's nominalist in its metaphysics, and then it's constructivism and self-apotheosis. They think they're playing God.
This is one thing I want to inject. I apologize. I want to inject here.
I think that the education system is downstream from that, right? Then we had like Dewey and all of these people downstream, the whole Russell clan that infiltrated Johns Hopkins and Charlotte Iserbyt and I just blanked on his name. Oh, Anthony Sutton are really great resources on this. But sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, the point that I wanted to make is that when you're talking about this foundational what makes us human, I just been watching a series of this one guy just popped up on the computer, and it was on AI, and they were talking about how much data processing they need to kind of mimic the human mind of just having to think of, we just put all this energy into processing data and all of a sudden it'll become sentient or something.
And they were not going to happen.
Well, this is what they were saying. The reason it can't happen is because we haven't really got in what it is to understand what consciousness is. What a person is, what humanity is. Can you code that? Can you do incentives for that? Then they start coming up with technology. They're actually using neurons, human brain tissue, to be able to interface with silicon, and it uses a lot less energy to process, but it's also dynamic and consciousness. I'm damn. Then you get into some old books by Asimov, the science fiction writer, the last question, the last answer, he really delved into a lot of this stuff on what it is to be human, to have consciousness. And I'm like, well, I'm not even sure I want to have a digital consciousness. But it is, first we have to understand what consciousness is, what makes us uniquely human, what we can do that, AI can't. And well, we got to make it to where they can, so it can be cut. Why? Well, because we want to. The understanding of what it is to be human, what it is that we're trying to retain, what it is that's being taken away from us, what's being influenced in the water, in the air, in the food, in the chemical. It's they, them, those. They turn a dial and make you a little less something that's a threat to them, well, they're going to turn the dials. And so that's why I delve into a lot of these issues as you have, but I'm going, now what? We got to have a now what? What's your now what?
I told you, I think it starts very, very small. I think it starts with each person, using what they have between their ears, really defending their cognitive sovereignty, honing that, understanding what that is. So each person needs to do that. And then I think it starts with the kids are under such assault. I think in my generation, we certainly were, but it's way worse now. So I think for parents, they have a real responsibility. And what I would tell parents is, if you are, start with your values. So if you are somebody who is biblically oriented and you're a person of faith, read the Bible and explain it to your children, because those metaphysics are intrinsic in the Bible. If you're not, teach them Aristotle and Aquinas. That is what our country was predicated on, that philosophy, those metaphysics. And those are, yes, they're Christian metaphysics, but again, we have the First Amendment. You don't have to be a Christian, right? You don't have to, subscribe to Old or New Testament, but that is the metaphysics upon which the laws are predicated. So people need to understand that. So I would say start there. That seems like a very basic thing to do, but it has huge impact. It's the reason it has been completely eradicated, because it is so effective. Start there. Then I would say start with things that you have really tangible control over. I gave the example of the mama bears fighting critical race theory, and they had a lot of impact fighting in their local school districts. So, become involved in your school boards. Do that. Right now, you should be, whether it's your homeschool, I will also add this, really push hard against these vouchers and the school choice nonsense, because it is not about choice. This is about making every school, including homeschoolers, part of government school, right? That is what that is about. It's about
register, sign up, and license. Yeah.
Put all of your children into a computer. That is what it is about. It's actually about putting every child on the blockchain ledger. That is what school choice is all about. So fight like mad against that. But then take some ownership over whether it's your homeschool and you pass a bill, or whether it's your local, your one school or your district, and you say there's no AI allowed before 6th grade. There's no reason any child needs to be interfacing with AI before, I don't know that after 6th grade either, but you can say that. There is just no justification under 6th grade other than to train them and to have cybernetic feedback loops training programming your child. That is the only reason for AI under 6th grade. So
surveillance
can take
and categorizing. It's like when I was a kid, there was a big thing. That'll go on your permanent record. Be on your permanent record. Right. And even as a kid, then I'm like, really? I mean, come on. Well, now it exists.
Yeah.
You get on the permanent record of your social credit score of you're not allowed. So it is a real threat.
Is not going to have mercy. There's no mercy with an AI Stasi. Let me just tell you that. AI Stasi is not going to be kind. So
this person needs. See, that's one thing. I give you an example. My sister did, I don't know, some genetic 23andMe thing or something, ancestral, whatever the hell she did. And she goes, "Ooh, I got our line." I go, "Well, I wish you would have told me. Now you got my DNA family line of Ernie record out there somewhere." And I know some AI is going to go, we kind of linked up the he's got the William Wallace gene. There's a little bit too much Scottish in Ernie, and we're going, ooh, we need the AI go nip that in the bud. We got, all of a sudden the drone's coming for Ernie. Why? Hey, man, you ticked off too many boxes, and we just do a preemptive strike. And you say that in jest, but that's where we're going.
It is where we're headed. Absolutely. Pre-crime, thought crime. Yeah, that's exactly. So I would tell parents to do that. I gave you the example of like the, farmers, certainly people who are in a position to be self-reliant. I think that's something people absolutely can do. If you can be resourceful in terms of providing for yourself in any kind of way, I encourage people to do that. And then not to do that in isolation, do that with communities, right? There's a lot to be said for that. And then you can instill your values in, of course, start with yourself, start with your family, and then ripple out from there. The problem is it's become completely inverted, right? Everything is from a top down. And it's so ironic because you see it on both sides, of the political spectrum. Like it's and you actually see it inverted. Right, the left claims that they're all about top-down infrastructure, but what they actually do is, they go laterally. They infiltrate through the institutions, long institutions. And then what does the right do? The right claims that they're all about grassroots, and they want everybody to be local and bottoms up. And really, what they do is they sleep at the wheel, and then every 4 years they're like, "Oh my gosh, we've got a federal election, we've got to mobilize." It's like, guys, let's get it together. That's not self-governance. It's not at all. And so we just outsource everything.
When they have self-governance, you got to self-govern. It's
but
we really push decentralization of everything. We have like
I want to talk about that because decentralization has become this huge buzzword, and it is incredibly deceptive. I encourage people to remember, or if you haven't read, read H.G. Wells' World Brain. In his World Brain, he talked about how the decentralization of the information ganglia, which back then were the academic institutions and, like the media, that sort of thing. But today, I would argue that's the internet and technology, right? Those are the information institutions. So all these people are talking about decentralization. I mean, we have the DAOs, right? Decentralized autonomous organizations, which are essentially just network states, another variant of a smart city. And you have all of these terms. They keep talking about decentralized as the buzzword. But what happens if you read Balaji Srinivasan's network state? He actually says it's decentralized towards a re-centralized center. So this is not about true decentralization the way people think of it. It's a buzzword to appeal, I think, largely to libertarians because it's a broad tent. They can get people on the left, people on the right, people who are anti-establishment, and it sounds very appealing. But really, they're using a term that's a buzzword, and they are actually re-centralizing it towards the center. So this is, to me, very deceptive. And every time I hear the decentralized, I'm like, really, but how? Explain to me the mechanism. And most people are not tech savvy, so they don't really understand how it works. They just hear decentralized and they say, oh, great, it's decentralized. That must be a free market. Not that there aren't problems with free markets. I mean, I philosophically actually have a lot of problems with libertarianism. I mean, I really, I love the spirit, the energy of my libertarian friends, but philosophically, it's a kind of a nominalist philosophical movement. So but that appeals to them, this decentralization.
It appeals to me to the point that we're doing it. We're decentralized out in the middle of the desert of bite me. We're taking more responsibility for certainly educating your kids. I don't want to here, Uncle Sam, raise my kids, supply my food, supply my water, supply my air, the more decentralized down to the individual, I think the better off we are. Now, what you're talking about.
Yeah. If it's truly decentralized.
Well, see, this is what I want to make sure we get the distinction. When you're talking about, they say decentralized, but really they control Bitcoin. It's GoldmanSachs.gov coin now, so it's not really that decentralized. I get it. Of course, they're going to use the buzzwords. But I'm about, look, it's all ones and zeros. Like when we store the MP4 that we do on this, we just now started to go back on social media. I've been doing Freedom's Phoenix since 05, radio since 03. I've been doing this a long time, activist since the late 80s. What happened was I could understand, certainly after the Lovolution, Ron Paul Revolution, I'm the one that created the Revolution logo, that love logo. Mm-hmm. And we were heavily involved in that. It was spontaneous order of a whole generation, a lot of people, their grandparents, their kids, everybody was freedom's the answer, what's the question? Dr. Paul did a great job on that. Well, what happened was you have this idea, this concept of decentralization is better to organize society as your agency, you're in charge of you. And the whole purpose of any government is to protect that. If they're not doing that, they're not supporting individual rights, if they're not defending you against aggression then what the hell are they there for? So that, you gotta vote harder. Well, the Revolution, we was activism, So, and then we're on the Love Bus here that we did the Love Bus Liberty Tour for the past few years during COVID. We took the show on the road, got to meet a lot of people, and I could see the rural areas, the people that were the ranchers, the farmers, the loggers, the miners, so their families in general were fine, except the schools. It was the schools where they really were trying to get Generation Next and do it. People are, screw this. They go complain at the school board or they just pull their kids out. So for me, decentralization is true decentralization. But what you're advocating for is be decentralized, take care of your own whatever, it doesn't matter. But you're going to have the a centralized opinion, which was supposed to be accurate voting, which, we got to wait till we get back to that. But you're advocating, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're advocating that there needs to be a community of thought around is there a central plan for freedom? I'm like, there's no central plan for freedom, but a central plan for having your own central plan. Something. What is it that you're advocating that humanity advances towards if it's not leave me aloneism? You can't do that. You're going to have to what?
Well, I think you're choosing a very binary kind of path, and it's not about uniform thought. I never advocate for uniform thought. I hold the first principle of free will very, very dearly. So while it's great if people agree with me, I certainly don't want to force that upon people. If you don't agree with me, you don't agree with me, and please enlighten me as to why. And maybe my opinion will change. If not, maybe I'll have more cogent arguments, as a result. So it's not about uniform thought. To me, it's that I think this idea of leave me aloneism. Okay, well, yeah, it's supposed to be protect my inalienable rights. That's really what it's supposed to be. It's not so much a leave me aloneism because I'm my own God. That's not what it is. And I think that there's become this mindset that there either has to be, everybody's the architect of their own reality and it's all relative, or there's institutions. And I don't think that that's accurate. I think that there's the whole way that the system was designed was that there was supposed to be institutions, but the government itself was supposed to protect our inalienable rights. That was the job of the government. It's not supposed to grant rights. It's not supposed to give privileges. None of that is outlined. It was literally.
What do you say you do here? Yeah.
So I'm saying people need to start taking some responsibility. I think that's a huge part of it, and people don't really want to. People, I actually think go off in my own island seems more palatable to people because it's a way of just abdicating all of their responsibilities. It's like, okay, I'll just take care of me.
No, don't misunderstand me. That there's obviously going to be
community.
community.
And go home?
There's going to be community. In fact, we have a mesh network that we put up here. We're working with Aaron Day on, the Xano project, decentralized, communication and commerce. And, you're going to have community. You need community.
Here's the thing. It's not just community, because here's the thing. So if you say, like, you talked about all of these encroachments that to give the voting example, like they're like, okay, we're going to do this regardless of how you vote, regardless of what you want, regardless of what you say. So you think that even if you go off the grid, they're not going to just keep marching forward? So what I'm saying is there needs to actually be, within the system, resistance. There needs to be people using the system and correctly. And I'm advocating that can actually be done very effectively, pretty locally. And that is actually where we've seen the biggest impact be. And oftentimes that actually has a ripple. We've seen bills passed in one state and people have used that blueprint and then replicated it in another state. Maybe the state with the best ideas win. Great. Awesome. If they become complete tyrannical, horrendous places, a lot of people will leave, hopefully, because they should exercise their free will. We saw that with California, how many people fled, and it was because they were just asinine. I mean, they were awful, right? It became just a totalitarian mess. And so a lot of people did leave. And I think but a lot of other states, they saw, there was a bill with, I can't remember now what it was, but it was something on the homeschooling where they were advocating for true choice, not school choice, but for parental rights, which is what the Constitution is supposed to defend. You have a God-given right to educate your child as you see fit. I might not agree with how you educate your child, but you have a right to educate your child any way you see fit for your child. And they created a bill to defend that parents have the right to truly homeschool. And in Tennessee, where I live, you don't. You have to be part of one of 4 different categories, and they're all surveilled in some sort of a way, and they're all part of really a bigger infrastructure of.
Well, that surprised me that Tennessee has gone that way. They've been a little bit more freedom-oriented, I thought. Is that changing?
Well, this is just it. You have all of these pretenses of these red states and blue states. I have been to my state capital so many times, and they actually argued with me. They said, Courtenay, we're the good guys because we're quote unquote Republican. I don't know why you're arguing with us. And I explained to them the Hegelian dialectic. They didn't like that at all. They told me I was using big words that they don't understand. And they actually threatened to kick me out. It was pretty funny. Of course they can. I didn't violate anything. I just used words that they didn't like. So they, I told them to their face. I said, I actually wish we had a Democrat governor, because then maybe you wouldn't just blindly carry water for him. But he's a globalist. He's a globalist shill. And so you're just carrying these bills to please the governor. You haven't read most of them. You don't know what's in them. And this is done by design. They send them these huge, monstrous bills that 12 hours before, slap it on their desk. Most of them can't possibly read it. Most of my allies in this, battle were the Democrats. We were against some of these bills for very different reasons. I didn't like their reasons at all. I didn't agree with them, but they were against some of these school choice initiatives. And so it was interesting for very different reasons. And then what they wanted was more provisions, more surveillance, and more measures implemented. I was very against all of that. But at least at the first stop, those were my allies, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess. And so you have this where you have all of these divisions and all these labels that are being put, but people aren't doing the actual work. So again, this is what I'm talking about. This is doing the actual work. People getting involved, understanding what is actually happening, and holding their elected officials accountable. This is not, I advocated my responsibility and the guy has an R or a D, and so I cheer them on. That's not how the system's supposed to work. This is supposed to be, you were supposed to be representing my values, and you are failing to do that. You are getting fired.
Voting.
That's
See, the thing is it's always, I've operated from I participate in the election process. I've run for Congress 3 times, the U.S. Senate against McCain, Secretary of State twice, legislature twice, county record. I mean, I'm an activist, been out there. I got something to say. I'm going to say it. Make them say it. Say it. Some bitch, say it. So it's not that I'm not intimately familiar with the electoral process, so much so that I know better. Okay, so this is what I really focus on. Has been like I'm doing the Ron Paul Revolution. I didn't vote. I knew better, but what was I doing? General public opinion. How long could we keep him at that podium? How long could we have this rhetoric out there? How long, how many times, how many minds we could free? The general public opinion of what? The proper role of government. So your general public opinion that you're advocating going towards is what?
So right now you won't have to worry about it because AI is going to take over. That is where we're headed. Almost every state right now currently has a digital governance summit that meets annually. In Tennessee, it was in May. So they're already doing that. The AI World Society is slated for 2045. And they have talked about where this is the UN Centennial for Vision, and it's in conjunction with Boston Global Forum. You have all these Hegelian dialectics, right? We've got the auspices that we're now fighting against the UN, but instead we're just adopting it here. Trump's AI action plan has created the blueprint for the Technate to be the Technate infrastructure for the world, to do exactly what the UN AI World Society has laid out. But they talk about having complete supplanting of all human government being replaced by AI. And, as I said, the
Palantir greasing the way.
Right. So as I said, dark enlightenment is becoming much more well-known. And they, of course, talk about their GovCorps, which was, envisioned by Nick Land. And then Curtis Yarvin calls it SovCorp, Sovereign Corp. And this is essentially network states. It's not any different. It's different names. But this is all the same kind of concept. You're going to have your little digital fiefdoms, and you can all go be good little serfs in your digital fiefdom, whichever one you choose to be a part of. But good luck exiting it. I know they say that you get free exit if you don't like it, but as I said, you try negotiating with a recursive smart contract. And that I think is going to be pretty difficult, but we'll see. So we've got this where, they talked about rage, right? This was Yarvin's concept, retire all government employees. And people were championing this under Doge. And I'm all for getting rid of bloated government bureaucracy and, wasteful spending. I'm all in favor of that. Don't get me wrong. And I'm glad they exposed some of it. However, the plan is to replace it all with AI. There's no mercenary with AI, right? No mercy with AI, right? AI is not going to show you grace. You can't negotiate with AI. They're just going to come and do whatever they've been programmed to do. And if you want to talk about tyranny, that sounds like incredible tyranny to me. So all these people who are complaining about our current system, I'm not saying that it isn't incredibly flawed, but I'm advocating we actually go back to some semblance of what it was designed to do and try and reinforce that rather than moving forward into this AI, like complete totalitarian virtual reality state, which is it's leading towards a post-human world. So one may be flawed, but I actually think it's a lot better than where they're heading us. And they're heading us in there, again, in very palatable ways. This idea of these network states where you just have these entrepreneurs who are so innovative and they're coming up with all their great ideas. I'm not saying some of them aren't really well-meaning and some of them have the best of interests, at heart. I think they may really care about humanity and they're trying to do good things. But ultimately, they're creating digital fiefdoms. And it's again like the different flavors. They're selling some to libertarians, some to the Republicans, some to Democrats, some to the anti-establishment people. It's just whatever political ideology you've subscribed to, you have now become completely victim to because you're subscribing to ideology, epistemology, and you have no roots. And I am suggesting that we get back to that, try and restore it, and especially work at the local level. You do have some power there. There is agency, and we've seen it. So people who tell me you have no power, the political system, I don't have much hope in the federal and even the state level. I've seen how corrupt it is. But people can really get involved locally, and they can make some difference. And that can have a ripple effect. And I encourage people to do that and to really understand what our system is and how to operate within it. Because before we abandon it, the next place to go, unfortunately, is digital slavery. And I'm just not in favor of that.
Well, where do you think it's going other than that? We have slavery. We've been, conditioned to be whatever. And digital gulag is what difference?
We have a lot of our freedoms have been eroded. That is true. We are not completely slaves, though. That is actually false. When you look at what the technocracy is designed to do, that is complete slavery. They have the power to completely remote control you. I'm not saying they're doing that at the moment. The technology is there. If they want to, they can tie that to cryptocurrency and completely control you, not just through surveilling your money or limiting what you can buy and sell. Of course, all of that is very invasive, complete violation of your rights and your Fourth Amendment, all of that. And I'm not advocating any of it. But they could do even worse than that. I mean, they can literally remote control you through through cryptocurrency. Actually, there's a patent on it. I mean, Microsoft has a patent on it. So when people talk about how we're enslaved right now, I'm not saying that our freedoms haven't been stripped. A lot of our freedoms have. We still have agency. We still have free will. Once it goes to some sort of a digital system like that, they can literally eradicate free will. And that means they eradicate human. That means they're headed towards a transhuman, post-human world. That is very different. So I'm saying, as flawed as our system is, I think people need to start understanding what it actually was designed to do, reclaim our free will, reclaim what it means to be human, and people want to do this by tackling the biggest mountain possible. I mean, if you are not prepared to climb Mount, Yosemite or something, like maybe start by running up your hill. I think that's what I'm advocating, is people start looking there. It's a, cliche, and I don't always align with Jordan Peterson on much, but it's like, start with making your own bed. Right.
Clean your room.
Clean your room. Yeah.
This is, the reason we went the direction that we have was because there needs to be this exercise of your own agency. And, do I think that I'm far? I mean, I got like one neighbor within 5 miles. I'm out in the middle of the desert intentionally. Right. Do I think they're coming? Hell yeah, they're coming. 30 miles down the highway, here is Belmont, which is Bill Gates' smart city, plug you in the back of the head. Where's your vaccine shot? I get it. This is, I'm a little further out. I'm over here. Are the clipboards going to come? Of course they are. Sooner or later, the expansion of the valley is going to make it out here. And, as a kind of a fun way of, are you far enough away? When I was out here, and of course in the day, you get beautiful stars. I mean, it's just, oh my God. Well, I noticed for the first time that the constellation Orion, the 3 belts, that it looked like he had a penis. You know, you get out far enough, you have like this galaxy cluster that looks like a kind of a little to the left there. You know, so I'm looking, I'm going, what the crap? I never noticed that. So I go on, I do a search, Orion's penis. Sure as hell, comes up all over the place. So I go, you're not far enough away from the city unless your Orion has a penis. Just saying. You know, you need to get far enough away. Is that a goal? I mean, are you like away from the influences, or you need to be close enough to have influence on them? And the reason why? Is it for my benefit, or is it for just part of humanity? You need to advocate. The only way you can be free is to advocate it for everybody, and how you advocate it. It seems like, you know, I'm all about movements. I'm going, you know, what's the next movement? This, you know, homesteading, tiny house out in the middle, never mind, I'll take care of it, movement. Homeschooling, movement. Self-expression, sign everywhere, a sign, movement. It is spontaneous order from the people that, you know, mostly is an inspiration for others. The fact that it's like Milgram and Stanford experiments and all that, it's when the only time that people really were resistant in high numbers is when they saw somebody say no. I mean, you got to be, you know, an inspiration to others, and it seems like that's what you're looking for, of movement, of people recognizing that they can express their free will with others, you know. And I'm it seems like that's what you're going for. And
Yeah.
how does that manifest? You're saying, well, national, state, guy, but local. You know, local what? Local municipality, local as far as I can see over the horizon, the county level, municipality. I mean, I'm out. You know what? You know, I'm movement of ain't nobody to move. You know, I'm good. You know, but the thing is that that's what I'm seeing, is that you're advocating for a movement of what?
So, well, I don't have like a one prescription. People want smoking guns, but I'm really advocating for people to, when I say I'm trying to, you know, inform, inspire, and empower people to exercise their free will, I mean it. That means that each and every one of us will have a different role. You know, if you want to live remotely, do that. I'm not telling people what they should do or what's going to be better. There's not a blanket prescription.
No central plan for freedom.
There's no central plan for freedom. However, I'm not, I'm not advocating that we completely abandon the idea of institutions either. So a really good example, I think, is just like the education system. So as much as I'm an advocate for homeschooling, a lot of parents have found that it doesn't always work out so well. It's not always super feasible, right? Like, so they've started to pull up. They've pooled together with other, you know, families, and maybe they've started these pods, right? They've, you know, or they're starting to get resources from elsewhere and pool things together. So they're building some sort of an infrastructure, because it's just not always feasible that mom's going to be home all day and teach every subject. That's just not realistic for every family. If you can do it, great, go for it. I encourage you to do so. If you feel, you know, called to do that and you think that that's going to be the best situation for your family, I'm not here to tell you not to. But a lot of families have found that that's not feasible for them, or it's not the best for them. So when you think about, but then you think about like higher learning. I mean, we see how corrupted these institutions, academic institutions, have become. But that doesn't mean that there's not value in having fellowship, that there's not value in having some sort of overarching institution where people can learn, where people can bounce ideas off of each other, where there is also checks and balances. Because if I'm living in a vacuum and I'm just an autodidact and I have nothing to measure it up against, again, we go back to reality, right? Where are the checks and balances? Otherwise, I'm just making stuff up in my head. And that's not always all that useful or productive. So I think there needs to be a balance. And I'm saying what the Constitution drafted was actually an infrastructure for us to have some sort of, institutions, government. And I think that we can operate with that. But yes, I think that most of them are really corrupt. I'm not denying that. But I think that when people want to fix it, they go to the top. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying go locally. You said, is it, municipality? Is it, school board? It's whatever you feel called to do. I mean, for some people, they're passionate about farming. Then go be a part of your farming district. Get together with other farmers. See what bills you can either draft or push against, that are being, encroaching upon your liberties, and, take action there. And there's a lot of power in you getting together with those people who are advocating for what should be your inalienable rights that are being encroached upon. Maybe you're passionate about, the geoengineering. We saw them do the bills pushing against that. So I'm not saying there's not a blanket solution here, but I think we have become so demoralized that we have abdicated our responsibilities and we're not taking any kind of action. And I just hear this all the time. Oh, so you're saying vote harder. Well, what's that going to do? Okay, well, yeah, we should just give up. Let them win. They would love nothing more than for everybody who does advocate for freedom and free will to just sit on the sidelines and say, yeah, we have no power. So, yeah, we're just opting out of the system. Like, that's exactly what they want. I don't see any utility in that. I see utility in people taking action where they can. And it's not going to look the same for everybody. We don't all have the same resources. We don't all have the same gifts, strengths, and talents and passion. So people need to start with that. What do you care about?
See, the voting thing. I mean, I'm intimately involved with, the political process. I give you my bio, whatever. I've been there, done that, saw behind the curtain. And it's so bad. It's so bad.
I don't disagree.
My thing is that they justify their existence by your participation. It is.
I hear this all the time.
But I think that's true. They are justified in doing what they're doing because you signed up for it. Did you register to vote? Did you vote?
I think it's a massive psyop. And I'll tell you why. Because they can easily, right now they manipulate things. But if everybody just walks away, then they have all the power. And you think they're going to give up the voting system just because people have opted out of it?
Okay,
no.
Okay. See, you and I are on totally different, belief systems here.
Yeah.
My thing from personal experience is that they already control the elections. You may choose from communist candidate A or fascist candidate B.
I've already told you I agree with that. We don't disagree on that. I absolutely agree. I don't think the answer is then just walking away, because then you've just let them win, right? You basically said, okay, yeah, you control it. We're just going to let you have complete control, even public, appearance of it. You take over, do whatever. I'm saying I don't subscribe to that. I'm not saying that I don't think it's corrupt and that they've already manipulated the system. I mean, basically, who was it? It was Carol Quigley who did, his 1,400-page tome on tragedy and hope as the archivist for the CFR. He pretty much admitted that for over 100 years they had been, the CFR had been selecting and choosing our elected officials. So, he was very proud of that disclosure of the book. They were not happy with him because they were like, we're secret for a reason. Why are you just spilling our secrets? But he was very proud. So, I mean, we have some evidence that that's been going on for a really long time. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I'm saying I don't think just because something's corrupt that the answer is to walk out. I think that gives them more power. That's exactly
no one would ever accuse me of walking away. I mean, I've been heavily involved.
I'm not accusing you. I know you've taken action. I'm not saying that. Yeah.
Well, my thing is that just like with you, I'm going, all right, so what action? So, yeah, okay, we know all this. Now what? Where's the now what? James Corbett and I do a show for years. Every other week, he and I go, and we really kind of gravitated more towards solutions. And we're like, what's the solution?
Told you, I mean, how many solutions did it give you? And I told you.
No. I understand. As a valid, competing, or complementary solution is that I'm not empowering the beast that's devouring me. I'm stopping. The future is all about credibility. Where they get your credibility is, I'm elected. This is Trump's
I have
first.
To tell you,
let me go ahead and finish this point.
Okay.
Let me finish this point. You'll understand.
Yeah, sure.
The first term of President Trump, when he got in, I got the shiny badge. I got elected fair and square. I'm president. Do what I say. And they go, nah, not so much. And then they got all the obstacles. I'm going, is that really where the power is? No, it's like you say, it's in each of us. We have to declare our agency. To highlight the problems is one thing. Then what's the solution? Well, the solution is we understand the problem. You're a big help with that. And then, what do we do about it? Well, we reclaim our humanity. With what? By just doing it. I'm looking for a parallel society. I don't need them. I need my community. I need my family. I got 4 kids and 12 grandkids. I'm in. This is I'm not doing this, at kind of a haphazard. I really, truly believe the more we claim over the decisions daily of our breathing in and out, and preventing anything or anybody from preventing us from breathing in and out, that is the solution in my mind. I'm like, but I participate. I'm connected. We go to a lot of, we just came from a couple months ago, 90th birthday party in Texas for Ron Paul. Well, I got hooked up with all the old guard of the Revolutionaries and everybody's got their own thing. Everybody's out there doing, we are engaged. And a lot of us overlap in this. It's just not focused on fixing the people sitting at the Capitol. Because I have absolutely no respect for more than count on one hand of anybody that it's the system is the problem. It's the delegation of our individual autonomy and authority to somebody else.
It's not, though.
All right, explain that to me.
It's not. It only is if people allow it to be, and that's what we've done. Just that whole mindset.
Eternal vigilance.
If I vote for an individual, I'm not voting for them to have authority over me. I am hiring them. I'm putting them in office to represent me. And then it is part of my job is to hold them accountable, hold their feet to the fire. And when they don't, we're supposed to get them out. People don't do that. We don't redress our grievances. So I do want to just address something, though, that you said. It's like, I'm not denying how corrupt it is. And honestly, a lot of this conversation about voting, I think, is kind of a moot point because they're trying to supplant all governments with AI. That's where they're going. So right now, I think people need to be taking power locally against some of those movements. So you talk about you can go off the grid and be with your family, but unless people stop all of the spraying over your land, and we have seen some success with that, people who have made through political action, stopping that. Otherwise they can just do whatever they want. They don't need a government to do that. The government is supposed to be protecting, again, your inalienable rights. That they're not giving you privileges.
Shut down the government and the sky's cleared up.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that. I don't know how accurate it is. I haven't tracked, but they did ban the in my area. They banned the the climate, the geoengineering stuff. So we've seen a major improvement there. But I've heard that elsewhere, so I can't speak to that.
Well, I'm out in the desert. I can see it here.
But they don't need the government to do that, is my point. They don't need a government infrastructure. However, you do need an infrastructure to be able to ban it and to put pressure on them. Do you understand where I'm going with this? I know a lot. It's a very enticing idea. Like, we'll just get rid of government altogether. But an oligarchy that's operating supranationally doesn't need that government infrastructure to enslave us. And once they put out AI, they certainly don't. And they can entice people to opt into their own tyranny, which they're doing. They do that all the time. So I'm saying is there needs to be pressure for them to do what they're supposed to do, which is to protect us, to work for us. And are they incredibly corrupt? Again, you keep going back to the Capitol, Washington, D.C. I'm not telling people to take action there. I'm saying start locally. I keep bringing up the school board. We saw how effective that was. We've seen locally how people push back against some of these, the chemtrails and the geoengineering. That made a difference. People need to, wherever they're passionate and wherever their resources lie, start making some moves there. I really think there needs to be some moves against this AI. Make moves against, maybe create like sanctuary zones where they can't have these, cryptocurrencies that are being the Congress-backed digital currencies. No, we don't accept them in this district. I think there are things people can do, and that is actually working in the political system as much as people hate it. But they want to replace the whole thing with AI, and then you'll have really no agency. So we can argue all day about whether it works or not. But once they replace it with AI, we cease to be human. So,
I really just started a deep dive into AI at a much more foundational level of what we're dealing with. And I got so sick of, you do any search and it's an AI search, And so I installed Grok on my phone, Grok 3. I didn't pay for it, just got the free thing. And the only reason I did that was because the stated goal, is that it's a truth-seeking thing. We're looking for the truth. Elon promises, well, we're just going to find the truth. Well, I'm sure it's controlled by whatever. But I'm just, and the biggest thing I use it for building materials or doing, what's the volume of this, how many bags of concrete I need, it's convenient for that. Any philosophical, what I'm supposed to do, kind of political, I don't give a crap. I'll take care of business myself. But I understand your point. I've had this conversation, and to give your opinion some weight, some very close, anarchist, libertarian, whatever, voluntarist friends, they go, yeah, you got to have some organization, you got to have some government, or you just can't have nice things. I mean, there's always that one guy. There's always that sociopath. There's always the bad people. But you have to hold them accountable. And it's so rare, if not never, that they actually are holding, I'm not getting an Epstein list. I'm not going to find out who the real assassin was. I'm not going to get these files opened up. I don't know.
But again, you're going so big. You're going to the biggest things. I've already said, I agree with you. That's incredibly corrupt. You don't start by climbing Mount Yosemite. Start with,
all right, where do I climb? I don't want my kids indoctrinated. I'm not giving them over to the state. Our children,
great. That's great.
I'm how we organize I'm big on spontaneous order. It's just general public opinion. It's by osmosis. It's like the 100th monkey kind of thing. People go, nah, because we got a dose of that with the Levolution of what spontaneous order can do. The bad guys didn't see that one coming. Well, what the crap? We got to get control of this internet thing. Then they, buy up TikTok, and Larry Ellison gets that, and Israel's all happy, and, they do. I'm like, there they go again. Then you have any kind of reaction that the people have. Certainly crypto was promised to the Liberty community as a peer-to-peer ability to bypass the system. Then all of a sudden, nope, we got to get adoption integration with the government, and it's goldmansucks.gov coin now. So I'm going, God, man, you guys can't leave anything alone. So how do you stop? They, them, those are going to do it because they can. Up until they cannot. That cannot, in your opinion, involves participating in the process locally to go, look, thou shalt not. Okay, I'm hip to that. And I'm just, decided to do my best to, get to where I'm as self-sustaining as possible before the clipboards come. Because they're going to, you did it wrong. Yeah, but I did it. But you did it wrong. I don't care. You're assuming I give a crap what you think. So this is the mindset that I'm in. I understand. I've been an political activist for a long time. But it was always to get the soapbox, certainly before the internet and podcasting and all that kind of happened. It was the only time for every 3 or 4 months, every 2 to 4 years, that somebody was paying attention. What's that crazy libertarian guys are saying? And that was our input. That was our activism. But now we have the internet. That was the only reason I did politics, is for get them to say it and everybody see that they said it and what their intent was. Well, now we have the ability to communicate directly peer-to-peer with each other and even do buying and selling. Well, now they want you to get an ID. I just had Ian Davis on. They're in the United Kingdom. You're neither be able to buy nor sell nor work or whatever without the mark of the beast. Well, a bunch of Christians are going to have to make a decision, because that's what this is. So I'm going, well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm not. I vote that. So how are you going to say not? How are you going to do it? You have to be able to sustain yourself breathing in and out without a permission slip. And if you don't do that, you're right. The politics is going to have an interest in me, that's for sure. So I understand very closely what you're talking about. my thing is that as I look at the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the precedents and history and so on, the American system is, I haven't found one better. I mean, it's the least smelly one of all the rest. I mean, that kind of thing, and it was founded on the idea of morals, morality. It's a Judeo-Christian, it's a concept of private property, a concept of free speech, a concept of, free will, the concept of the service that any government Declaration says it. The whole purpose for existence is protection of individual rights. Well, what happens when they're the ones taking them away? Well, you got to vote harder. I mean, I understand. I do understand. I just needed to I'm looking for the solution. This is why I asked the why. Why do you care? Why are you involved in this? Because you are of the belief that a general public opinion can be manifested into a movement of action locally to have the greatest impact on all our lives and the planet. I get it.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm doing it in my way.
I want people to start. I want people to start taking action. People, and unfortunately, the world we live in is such passive consumerism. People take the information, they listen, it sounds great, they don't do anything. And I'm saying I really think there are things people can do and should do. It's not going to look the same for everybody. What you're saying about being self-sustaining, whatever people can do to be self-sufficient, I said that from the beginning. I absolutely advocate that. If you're somebody who farms, if you're someone who builds, if you're somebody who makes things, great. And then trade with other people. Or build local small businesses. I'm all for all of that. That is absolutely essential. That's just part of being human, right? You take care of yourself, you take care of your family. So I have no problems with that. However, I also think that there are roadblocks we can put. There are bulwarks that people can put against some of these tyrannical encroachments. It's probably not going to happen rushing up to DC. I'd love it. That sounds great. But I don't think that's super realistic. But could you create some sort of sanctuary in small areas? I do think you can. I think there are pockets. You could start with your school. If your kids are in a public school, say in this school, get together with some other parents, impress upon them why the AI is so dangerous and how they're data mining your children. They're using cybernetic feedback loops to program your children and condition them, for a global technocratic workforce. And, get together with other parents who say, oh my gosh, that's a terrible idea. We do not want this, and ban it in your school. That sounds so small, but it's so huge. And that could have ripple effects. I'm just talking, that's just one example. There's so many things that people can do that are like that. Like I said, those bills against the geoengineering and the chemtrail, they were effective. You work within the system. I'm not saying everything has to be done through politics. There's lots of things people could do outside of the system. But I do think that there needs to be, especially when it comes to some of this technology, some of this AI stuff that is, really infringing upon our personal rights, health, well-being, all of that. At the local level, however local that is, wherever you feel you have power and agency and potentially community to support you, I think people need to take action on it. And if nothing else, maybe create pockets of places where we can push back.
This is, I get approached a lot for, repeating our efforts before in elections. I'm sign everywhere, a sign guy, because you can't censor it. Which is why we went to IPFS for the show will go up on interplanetary file sharing, so it can't be deleted. Our entire site had 600,000-700,000 headlines on Freedom's Phoenix over the decades of guy. Damn, and it's all protected because I understood how they were coming after censoring, editing, deleting, deplatforming. We saw this certainly in 2009 after the Levolution. They definitely targeted us. They go, hell no, we can't have that. So. From that point on, we just now are starting to go back on some of the platforms, but I don't suspect that it'll be forever. But there are more different platforms that are more decentralized. So we're on YouTube and Rumble, all that kind of stuff too now. But not until we had a parallel system to where it couldn't be deleted. This is why I advocate the decentralization part. First, be able to source your own food. First, educate your own kids. First, build your own home. First, then you could get involved and kind of protect. But you're not going to. You're just roadkill.
I don't know why you can't do both. Why can't people do both?
No, but I got to get this done first, because everybody's going to me. They're saying, Ernie, you need to really go back and do and kind of sign. We'll go, whoop ass. Let's do it again. Once more into the breach. It's like Godfather 3. They're going to pull me back in. And I'm just, man, it's pissing me off. But I understand. I'm not even disagreeing with you, but I just want there to be an understanding of an advocacy of more agency, more decisions I make, more separation from what the hell they do. I don't care because it doesn't. But then the only way to be free is to advocate it for everybody. So you got to do that advocacy thing. I understand. So I just wanted to understand where you were going. And as you have your next big movement project of whatever you're most proud of, keep me informed and come on and tell me all about it. We had a win and we're whipping ass because my oldest daughter and her family are likely, they've been, touring the country, road schooling their kids. They do well and they've got all their bills paid and silver shot up and they're like, woohoo, man, we're filthy staking. Well, waiting for real estate prices to go down and they're probably moving to Tennessee. So I'm going, and Glenn Jacobs is a good friend, and now he's mayor of Knox County. I guess they got county mayors. And, we have some friends, people, they like Tennessee. And I go, yeah, but there's too many bugs, man. I like Arizona and no bugs. Well, there is bugs, but,
but there are bugs. There's scary bugs there.
but, they're entertainment. So what I'm looking at is as you progress in this, and then after you, we're going to be talking to Patrick Wood. Well, Patrick Wood is a good friend. We've worked together and presented and kind of different things. When they started the Smart City thing, I go, hey, Patrick, you do all the technocracy stuff, what they're doing. I want to focus on the financing. And they had a whole big thing of how they're going to fees and do. There's some activism right there. They're going to rob from me again to pay for all their crap to control me. So this is, I get it. I understand. But the problem that I witness, I feel, is that individuals think if they join Team Jersey, whatever, red, blue, that they're missing the point.
And it's not what I'm advocating. I feel like you've kind of, forgive me, but I feel like you're kind of putting me in a box. It's not what I said at all.
I'm just trying to find what box you're in.
Yeah, I'm not in a box. Good luck. You can't put me into a box. I am very much my own person. I don't belong in a box. I will tell you, I have already agreed with you. Absolutely. Whatever people can do to be self-reliant, I advocate. That's awesome. I'm never going to be against that. I don't think it's realistic for everyone. Again, everybody's situation is different. We all have different resources. We all have different strengths, talents, gifts, and passion. I'm encouraging people to take action where it makes sense for them. Right now, what I'm seeing is a lot of apathy, a lot of passivity, and a lot of people who are just so angry that they're just kind of like, okay, I'm taking my ball and going home. And it's that I don't think that's productive. I'm saying that there's a lot of things people can do. It's not over yet. So we still have free will.
It's not over.
It's not over. Not everybody's going to take action politically. That's not going to happen for everybody. Not everybody's going to build a farm. Not everybody has access to land, right? Not everybody can homeschool. There are people who can do each of those things. I'm encouraging people to take action where they see fit. There's not a uniform solution to this. The problems are incredibly complex. But I will tell you that as things progress with the technocracy, that's going to be increasingly more difficult to escape. And I'm just getting very frustrated watching a lot of people who say, we need to opt out of the system. And they're literally going head first into technocracy, claiming that they're, in their own little, utopian environment. No, they're in their own little digital fiefdom is what they've opted into. And I'm trying to encourage people to recognize that because the technocratic control is unlike any other. Once they have you, up on I would argue a lot of people are already up on this blockchain ledger, but once they start implementing some of these technologies they're studying right now, or that they already have in some cases, I mean, the kind of control that they can have over people, and once they start, implementing this digital finance system, which I've done a lot of work with Patrick. He's incredible. I've learned so much from him. I'm actually in the process of writing a book with him, and we were doing monthly roundtables with Aaron Day, Craig Wenkelwicks, who's a financial expert. Along with, of course, Patrick, who's an expert in finance and technocracy, the OG who's taught us, all of us, all about all the looming threats. So we do that monthly. And I just, I've learned a lot over, pretty recently on all of this. And over the past few years that I've said, it was the first thing that I saw that was coming, was that they are trying to take away our free will. And technocracy has the power to do that. Yeah. So I understand what we're currently in is incredibly flawed, but I think that I really encourage people not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because as flawed as our system is, there are still things people can do. There is still agency people have. People do still have free will. Once technocracy is implemented, I don't know how much free will people will have. And I mean that actually quite literally. Some of these technologies operate through humans. When they talk about biodigital convergence, they mean it literally. They're talking about taking over your physical being. And, all these people who are, mentalists and think we're all just a mind and that's all we are, good luck. Because last time I checked, I'm pretty sure we are mind, body, spirit. It is all three. And so when they start taking control over, parts of our being, I don't know how humanity survives.
Well, hopefully by choices and options. See, that's what freedom is. It's options. Do you have a lot more freedom if you got a lot of money? Probably. You got more options. The thing that I'm advocating here is when the technological gulag comes, the panopticon is in your freaking phone. They have all of this. When it happens, you're going to take the mark of the beast for convenience. And I'm going, why? Well, because I got to eat. Why? Well, because I got to work. I got some excuse. Well, I'm trying to eliminate those excuses. You don't have to if you're prepared in your community to be more self-sustaining. This gives you the option of saying no, which is the movement in the direction of what you're talking about. If all of the people in the movement of we're going to act locally had to sign up for the digital, money,
I feel like
all of the...
You're missing it. So, yeah, of course, do what you can do to be self-sufficient. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pushing back against some of these. There are actual bills that you can create and push back or
no, I understand, but the ability to push back, to keep breathing in and out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What happens when you have your own land, you can make your own food, and they start putting smart dust right over it? What are you going to do then?
Keep eating? I don't know. What do you mean? They're gonna you get to the point to where you either make a decision not to take the mark, or you can't not take the mark.
I agree.
I want to be
that.
able to not to.
Well, I think everybody can make that choice, and I'm encouraging people, obviously, not to take the mark of the beast. I'm not advocating that anybody takes the mark of the beast, but I think there's a lot we can do to slow down the plans right now. I mean, I already brought up so many of the examples that were successful, so I don't know why we would just throw that away when you could be creating sanctuary pockets or that at least derail and create some sort of a protection for, or slow down the plans. I don't know why we wouldn't do that. Why are we
because of the vulnerability that we have? This is one thing. What would I do? I've run for state legislature, Congress, Senate, the secretary. I mean, I've been there, done that. But I go, where's the real power? It's probably the county. A lot of the county guys, they got their shiny badge and clipboard. It's county. That's the health department, the building department, this permit, you got to have permission slip from the Crown County. When they did the lockdown in the county. So I'm going, okay, we have 5 supervisors, per county here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. Do I advocate? Do I do a campaign? Do I go whip ass? Maybe. But not yet. Why? because I don't have the freedom when they come after you. Oh, you got this, you didn't do that wrong, you get to get a permit for, you got to tax a fee, because they got a lot of weapons. So I need to be able to keep breathing in and out by being decentralized, have my own communication, my own permanent record, my own digital footprint, my own. I want Jarvis, not Alexa. You know, if I'm going to have some AI or a robot, well, it's mine and not plugged in to Will Smith's iRobot, and all of a sudden it goes red and starts killing you in your sleep. I mean, you know, I understand, but I need to have the option to be able to do that without having to give up my life or that to my children, grandchildren. So I understand. You know, I'm just advocating for the ability, the option to be free with more autonomy. It is important to me, and I'm advocating.
I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I don't know what part of anything I've said says that I disagree with that.
I don't think so.
I want to give another example, though, of tremendous success that we had. You know, I'm not saying that it's over. People need to be vigilant about it because they just rebrand and they keep going.
Right.
But we saw last year where they were trying to propose national asset companies. The SEC tried to put it up on the New York Stock Exchange. And I won't take single-handed credit, but I was hugely involved in pushing back against this. You know, I went around on tons of different podcasts. I went up on InfoWars. I went to my state capitol and did a presentation that encouraged them to make bills pushing against some of the conservation easement bills that they were drafting at the time. And they stopped doing that. In fact, my senator told me that unfortunately it's why he got primaried out, because I was so effective in getting them to push back against these conservation easement bills. So we had huge success. They canceled this movement of the national asset companies up on the New York Stock Exchange. They got so much pushback because what I kept asking people to do, I didn't think that I would have any success. I didn't think other people would be able to stop it. You know, I thought all of us would just be kind of howling in the wind. But what I was hoping is that if I could encourage enough people to sign on the comments, because they did this through the holidays, they were hoping, and they had a very short comment period. It was kind of unprecedented in that regard.
I know how it works,
but I knew that if people would sign on those comments and submit comments, they could be part of the lawsuit. They'd have legal recourse. And so I was hoping that we get enough people to have a massive class action suit, right, against the SEC. And it turned out there were so many people who flooded comments, they actually stopped the whole thing altogether. So I just want to encourage people. I think there's just a lot of this mindset where people think they have no power. And it's just not true. And the powers that shouldn't be would love nothing more than for us to think we have no power. I'm not saying
it definitely is eternal vigilance. I got enough herding laws I can keep track, you know. But in the 90s,
I'm not saying people shouldn't build their own farms or be self-sufficient or homeschool if they can. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying
I understand. Yeah. You know, the problem we had in the 90s, because we have initiative and referendum and recall here in Arizona, we had a newspaper we published called Citizens Take an Initiative. And we'd have, every couple of years, we had like 36 initiatives. Well, if libertarians were this is what we would do. I mean, we have a bunch of those become law just because they're popular, and some legislator go, I'll put my name on that. You know, and then they, like unrestricted concealed carry here in Arizona was from our efforts in the 90s. Safe. Second Amendment is for everyone. Are you a safe gun owner? Are you an unsafe congressman? So we have fun with this, you know. But what I saw that our most effective way of changing legislative law and policy was general public opinion. It wasn't, I didn't care. They pass it, don't pass it, I don't give a crap. But everybody's going to know what side you're on. Well, what side are they on? The technocracy side, the government side, who's promised me I get to be a congressman president someday side. I know how it works, but it always comes down to what you're talking about, local activism, the impression that the people put on them. It gets to the point, though, they don't care because they're sociopaths. I saw the farm team of how they get legislators. It started off with the school boards. They didn't get paid, but they did multi-gazillion dollar budgets. And if they kissed enough butt, you too could be a legislator. And if you kiss enough butt there, you too can be congressman. I mean, it's like, it's almost, I used to give the joke, you have to be a pedophile as a minimum job requirement to be a congressman. I mean, it's so bad, but that doesn't mean, like you say, that you get involved. When we had the Levolution in 9 and 10, Ron goes to all the guys, you need to get involved in party politics. You need to go. And they go, where do you want to go? Go. You need to see. You need to experience it. You need to have firsthand knowledge of how it really works. Well, then they go, damn. I go, yeah. You know, what's the solution? General public opinion. That you know it sucks. Then here comes, 9/11 woke up a lot of people. The financial crash in 07, 8, 9, that woke up a lot of people. COVID woke up a lot of people. They're going, damn, damn libertarians were right. They really, crap, what are we going to do now? Well, here comes Courtenay Turner saying, well, here's some now. We got a show about it, and we're going to do some stuff. I'm advocating for some stuff. So if the audience, if you're of the mind that there needs to be some local stuff done, Courtenay Turner. She's not opposed to what we're doing, but she has a passion and a plan of that. Have a plan. I mean, do something. I'm definitely supportive of that, and I'm glad you came on and expressed yourself. Before you go, I want you to pimp all your sites and everything, and people know where they can hook up with you and be part of the Courtenay Turner movement. Go kick some ass. Tell them where they need to go.
All right. Well, my website is CourtenayTurner.com. I do spell my name a little differently. It's spelled phonetically Courtenay. It's pronounced Courtenay, but if you don't spell it correctly, you'll have a difficult time finding me. So CourtenayTurner.com. So that's where you can find all my podcasts and all the social media platforms, and I have a way of reaching out, the ways you can support the work I'm doing as well. That right there on the screen, if you're watching, you'll see the Omnivore that we just did. This was a Patrick Woods symposium that I had the great honor of hosting, and it was international. Dr. David Hughes, Dr. Daniel Brody, and Dr. Jakob Nordengard, all over the world, really talking about the digital attack on humanity. And Omnivore is a term that was coined by David Hughes. And this is the everything attack, the panopticon attack on us. So that is a recent symposium that we did. Then also my Substack is a really great way that you can support the work that I'm doing. I have all of my podcasts go out to my Substack, early access and ad-free for my paid subscribers. I very rarely put my articles behind paywalls, but occasionally I do. The most recent one that I put behind was the Epstein transhumanist conspiracy. I do encourage people to read that. That is really about this Game B movement and the overlaps and the philosophical underpinnings that lend themselves to transhumanism. I know some of the people in the movement may have the best of intentions and they may not think they're transhumanists, but I really outline very clearly how these funding sources overlap and where that goes. The only place it can go is technocracy and transhumanism. So you can find my writing there on my Substack. And we have Technocracy Roundtable that is once a month we're doing with Patrick Wood, who I hear will be on shortly, and also Aaron Day, who I hear will also be on. They're doing incredible work, both of them. I have tremendous respect for all that they are doing, and I'm honored to be working with them. And of course, Craig Wenkelwicks will be on as well, and he's a finance expert on the market. He has a whole harmonics theory of how the markets work. And so monthly, the next one is going to be October 22nd. We will be doing another roundtable. This one is going to be on AI in medicine, technocracy in medicine, and how I'm personally not of the mindset that Maha was infiltrated and hijacked. I think that that was kind of a Trojan horse from the beginning. I saw him really trying to push things like AI precision medicine long before Trump was even elected. was very concerned about that. Now he's talking about how it's not just MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, which who could argue with that kind of marketing, right? I mean, I'm all about making America healthy again. Like, I'm all about banning the seed oils and the chemicals and, you know, getting back to some real good basics that would be great for our health. And I think we should take ownership of our own health, like not depend on the government to do that. But that being said, he has now said that MAHA is about MABA, which is Make America Biotech Accelerate. And it just kills me. He used the word accelerate. Yep. That's what he said. And accelerate is part of
Say each of those words again. What? Make America what?
Make America Biotech Accelerate. So
accelerate. What does that mean?
Accelerationism. So this is the philosophy that is part of the Dark Enlightenment with Nick Land. He's what they consider right wing, although there's not that much difference, right and left accelerationism. But yeah, so that's just part of the Dark Enlightenment, and a lot of Silicon Valley have this mindset that we need to they're not in favor of capitalism. Obviously, they want to, you know, implode it, but they believe you should use it. The right wing ones want to use it as much as possible to push it to its apocalyptic state. So that we can get to these GovCorps and SovCorps. You know, they believe that if we use technology to push capitalism to the nth degree, that we will get to where we're supposed to be, which is these GovCorp, SovCorp, you know, techno-feudal fiefdoms. And so accelerationism, right? That whole concept of like move fast and break things. This is a very common kind of aphorism in Silicon Valley. So that's what they're talking about. Accelerate, you know, technology so that we can push capitalism to its apocalyptic state. And then they can usher in their complete technocratic control, which they think will be, of course, better for all of us. I'm not so sure of any of that. I call it the technological immunization of the eschaton, which is, you know, kind of this, for those who aren't familiar, immunization of the eschaton is kind of a political concept for bringing about end times so that we can experience heaven on earth. Anybody who's read the Bible knows that there is no heaven on earth. That's not how this works. But the technological immunization of the eschaton is this notion, I believe, where they want to terraform the planet and create a simulacra. So essentially, they believe it's a techno-spiritualism. They believe it's a Gnostic inversion where they believe they are gods. They are going to architect the reality, bring this, what they believe will be a heaven on earth. It's a simulacra of reality. For those who aren't familiar with the term simulacra, the best analogy I could use would be like if you have a watermelon, it's a real fruit, you know, and then you want to make watermelon juice. It's still got some watermelon in it, but then you go and you make watermelon candy, and it's just got the essence of watermelon. You might recognize the flavor, but there's no actual watermelon in it. It's just a simulacra. And that's kind of what they want to do to Earth, even to humans, right? Nick Land talks about technoplastic being. This is this idea of the synthetic biology, merging organic material with inorganic material, so that we become transhuman, leading to a post-human world. And so I think it's going to be a dystopian hellscape, but they do believe they're bringing about heaven on earth, right? They're extropians, and they think this is the best next evolution for humanity. And I've outlined some of this is rooted in more of a traditional Darwinian theory, which of course is still, it's still theory. It's never been proven. At best, I would say it's a hypothesis, really. But so many of these scientifically minded people accept it widely as fact, and so they've built all these false premises upon that. And then the other ones are more of a spiritual eugenics mindset. So people who might be disciples of someone like Barbara Marx Hubbard, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the idea of the noosphere, creating this collective mind, and that only certain people will evolve and ascend to that state, and the rest will be subsumed. Either way, it's all rooted in eugenics. And
get your Neuralink.
Yeah, exactly. So that does seem to be where they're all heading with all of that. So I say we resist.
I agree. I thank you. I'm just, I'm old. I've been doing this. I got gray. I started when I was 28 years old, and there was nobody. I was like, does anybody see what the hell? And it was libertarians. By a few years after I get started, I wouldn't join any group or part. I just, no, man, you're all part of the same thing. And they go, well, didn't you get the memo? Don't you know how it really works? You need to read this and this and this. And I'm like, where you guys been on my, well, of course they suppress this philosophy, but then there's a lot of opposition to a libertarian philosophy. Libertarians, diverse tapestry anyway, definitely not the Libertarian Party. That's a whole nother thing. But it is a way of looking at what the proper role of any government is. And our participation is what you articulate well, is that we have a responsibility. You want to be free? Well, guess what? Eternal vigilance. Then, that 20-year, Liberty Tree, water and blood thing, comes around every now and then. So they've been holding that off. And then there's the debt. There's so many problems, but it does come down to the individuals taking action, at least not for, certainly for themselves and their family, but you need community. You need to have people not even necessarily of like mind. I don't want the hippie commune on my land and an intentional community. I want unintentional as mine community, and then I'll voluntarily join up with whatever activism that I think is worthy of my time. Well, you keep me informed. You got one, and we know a lot of the same people. That's why you're on, and Patrick will be on here in a half hour, and then we do Aaron later. And so and we're good friends, all of us. We travel in the same kind of circles, but and it's like some of the guys, Ian Davis or Whitney Webb or James Corbett. I don't know, Ernie. You're still trying to fix that voting thing. You're going to lose your anarchist card. I mean, that kind of crap. So I get pressure from everybody, and that's one thing you realize that being an activist, you can never be anarchist enough. You can never be Christian enough. You can never. Yeah, but did you? Are you born again? Did you do it right? Did you say the right incantation of the what? I mean, I get that all the time. So I'm for advocating freedom for everybody. That's the only way I'm going to get it. And a lot of that is a lot of the work that you're doing. We made a new friend. Hopefully you'll feel comfortable to come back and tell us how you're doing in the future. You got something going, make sure we know, and we'll get you on and we'll talk about it. Kind of like a deal?
Awesome. Sounds like a great deal. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on and being such a good sport and answering all the questions and advocating. You did great. I want Courtenay Turner on our side just because saying, she's a strong personality. Thank you very much for coming on. You made a new friend. Thank you.
Yay. Likewise. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.